My name is Oliver Bennett, and this is the story of how I discovered my wife's affair through a piece of mail that was never meant for my eyes. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and the unexpected ways life can tear apart everything you thought you knew about the person sleeping next to you every night. I'm 39 years old, a freelance graphic designer living in Portland, Oregon, with my wife Hannah and our 10-year-old son Lucas. We've been married for 13 years, and until 8 months ago, I thought we had built something beautiful together in this city's vibrant arts community. Our house is a 1920s craftsman in the Hawthorne district that we bought 8 years ago for $485,000. With Portland's market explosion, it's probably worth around $650,000 now, though we still owe $2,100 a month on the mortgage. The house has become my office too. I converted the front room into a design studio where I work with clients ranging from local breweries to tech startups. It's not glamorous, but my $75,000 a year in freelance income, combined with Hannah's $68,000 salary as a curator at the Portland Art Museum, keeps us comfortable. Hannah and I met at a gallery opening downtown 12 years ago. She was this stunning brunette in a vintage dress, discussing the subtle political implications of a photographer's work with such passion that I couldn't help but approach her. I was designing promotional materials for the gallery then, and we started talking about how design and curation complement each other. She had just started working at the museum, full of ideas about making art accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy collectors who usually dominated the scene. Our courtship was pure Portland: coffee dates at Powell's Books, weekend trips to the coast, gallery openings followed by late-night conversations in dive bars about art, creativity, and what it means to live an authentic life. When Lucas was born 3 years after our wedding, it felt like we had created the perfect bohemian family. Hannah has always been the more sophisticated one between us. While I'm designing logos for local businesses and handling brewery marketing campaigns, she's curating exhibitions that attract visitors from across the country. She has this way of talking about art that makes everything sound profound. How a particular sculpture speaks to the human condition, or how a painter's use of color reflects social upheaval. I love watching her work, the way she can transform a collection of random pieces into something that tells a story. Lucas inherited both our creative genes. He's constantly drawing, and his art teacher says he has real talent. Our weekends usually involve family trips to galleries, art fairs, or museums where Lucas sketches while Hannah and I discuss the pieces. It's the kind of life I always dreamed of: creative, meaningful, connected to our community. Portland's art scene is intimate enough that most of us know each other. Hannah and I regularly attend gallery openings, museum fundraisers, and the kind of events where local artists network with collectors and gallery owners. I design promotional materials for several galleries, and Hannah often recommends my services to visiting artists or new cultural organizations. We've built a reputation as a creative power couple, the kind of people others come to when they need connections in the arts community. But 8 months ago, something started to shift. It began with Hannah's promotion to senior curator. The Portland Art Museum was expanding its contemporary collection, and Hannah was put in charge of several major exhibitions. With the new role came longer hours, evening events, and weekend installations. I was proud of her advancement, but I started to notice changes in our routine. Where she used to come home excited to tell me about her day, she became more reserved, often claiming she was too tired to talk about work. The gallery openings we used to attend together became events she needed to handle professionally, which apparently meant I wasn't invited. She started dressing differently too. More expensive clothes, sophisticated jewelry, the kind of outfits that looked out of place in our bohemian Hawthorne neighborhood. "It's part of the job," she explained when I asked about a new designer dress that must have cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "I need to look the part when I'm dealing with major collectors. First impressions matter in this world." The turning point came when she started talking about James Sterling. James is a 41-year-old sculptor and art collector from Seattle who has been making waves in the Pacific Northwest art scene. He owns galleries in Seattle and Vancouver, and his personal collection is worth over $3 million according to the art magazines. When he started visiting Portland regularly, ostensibly to donate pieces to our museum and establish connections in our artistic community, Hannah was assigned as his primary contact. James Sterling is exactly what the museum needs, Hannah told me over dinner one evening, about 4 months into their professional relationship. He understands art as more than just decoration. He sees it as cultural transformation. I noticed how her eyes lit up when she said his name. The changes accelerated after that. Hannah started attending collector dinners in the evenings, weekend trips to art installations in Seattle, and curator training sessions that seemed to happen at unusual times. She became passionate about expensive art that I had never seen her appreciate before. Abstract sculptures that cost more than our annual income. Paintings from European artists whose names I couldn't pronounce. Your commercial design work is very accessible, she said one evening, looking at a logo I had just finished for a local coffee roaster. There was something dismissive in her tone that I had never heard before. But James is helping me understand art that challenges people, that elevates them beyond their everyday concerns. I started feeling like a stranger in my own life. Hannah would return from her evening events energized and talkative, but not about anything I could relate to. She spoke about art theory, cultural criticism, and the responsibility of museums to educate the public about serious art. When I tried to contribute to these conversations, she would smile politely and change the subject. The exclusion wasn't just professional. Hannah's new role apparently required her to attend social events in circles where freelance graphic designers weren't welcome. It's not personal, Oliver, she assured me. These people are very particular about who they associate with. James says that in the serious art world, you have to be careful about maintaining certain standards. James says. Everything became about what James said, what James thought, what James recommended. He had opinions about restaurants, wine, travel destinations, and even child-rearing philosophies. Hannah began quoting him like he was some kind of authority on living an enlightened life. Meanwhile, I was handling more of the parenting responsibilities. Lucas needed rides to school, help with homework, and someone to attend his art classes while Hannah was networking with collectors or supervising installations. I didn't mind. I love spending time with my son. But I noticed the imbalance. Hannah's career advancement seemed to require her absence from family life. This is temporary, she promised. Once I establish these connections and secure the museum's funding, things will go back to normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. The Tuesday evening that would change everything started typically enough. I was in my home studio, working on a logo design for a new brewery in Southeast Portland. Lucas was in his room doing homework, and Hannah was at another important collector dinner that would probably keep her out until nearly midnight. My freelance work has been steady but unremarkable. The kind of bread and butter projects that pay the bills without providing much creative fulfillment. I had been designing marketing materials for local businesses for over a decade, building a reputation for reliability rather than innovation. Lately, though, I had been wondering if Hannah was right about my work being too accessible. Maybe I had been thinking too small, focusing on coffee shops and restaurants instead of pursuing something more ambitious. The brewery logo was for a place called Cascade Hops, and the owner wanted something that captured both Portland's craft beer culture and the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. I was experimenting with incorporating mountain silhouettes into typography when I heard the mail slot open and close. It was 7:30 p.m., which seemed late for mail delivery, but I didn't think much about it. I was deep in the design work, trying to balance readability with visual impact, when Lucas called from the kitchen. "Dad, there's some mail here for Mom." I finished the sentence I was working on, a tagline about brewing excellence in the shadow of the Cascades, and walked to the kitchen. Lucas was holding a white envelope with a medical office return address. Dr. Patricia Foster, licensed clinical psychologist, I read aloud. The envelope was marked confidential and addressed to H. Bennett. My first thought was that it must be related to Lucas. His school had mentioned the possibility of psychological evaluation for gifted programs, and I assumed this was part of that process. Hannah had probably initiated the paperwork without mentioning it to me. I'll take care of it, I told Lucas, taking the envelope. I returned to my studio and set the envelope on my desk next to my computer. The logo design was reaching a good stopping point, and I was curious about what kind of evaluation Lucas might be eligible for. Hannah had been talking recently about getting him into more advanced art programs, and psychological assessment was often part of the admission process. Without really thinking about it, I opened the envelope. The letterhead was professional. Dr. Patricia Foster's office on Northwest 23rd Avenue, specializing in individual therapy, couples counseling, and psychological assessment. But as I began reading the contents, I realized this had nothing to do with Lucas. It was a comprehensive psychological evaluation dated 6 months ago, clearly documenting Hannah's mental state and personal circumstances. The language was clinical but devastating. Patient presence with significant anxiety regarding ongoing deception of spouse about extramarital relationship. Reports relationship with J becoming emotionally and physically intimate over past 4 months, with increasing pressure to make permanent life changes. I read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. Hannah had been seeing a therapist for 6 months to discuss her affair. My hands started shaking as I continued reading. The evaluation was thorough, documenting weekly therapy sessions focused on what Dr. Foster termed compartmentalization strategies and exit planning considerations. There were detailed notes about Hannah's emotional state, her anxiety about maintaining her marriage while pursuing another relationship, and her fears about the financial implications of divorce. Patient expresses significant guilt over systematic deception, but reports feeling unable to terminate either relationship. Describes spouse as emotionally supportive but professionally limiting, and paramour as intellectually stimulating but financially risky. Paramour. The clinical term made it sound almost quaint, but the reality was devastating. Hannah had been cheating on me for 10 months, since right around the time James Sterling started appearing in our lives. The evaluation continued with Dr. Foster's professional assessment. Patient demonstrates classic patterns of emotional manipulation and compartmentalization. Recommends continued therapy to address decision-making paralysis and develop honest communication strategies with all parties involved. I set the papers down and walked to the kitchen, needing water and trying to process what I had just learned. Lucas was still at the kitchen table, working on a math assignment, completely unaware that his family had just imploded. "How's the homework going?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding strangely normal. "Good. Mom said she might be late again tonight." Of course she did. I returned to my studio and read through the entire evaluation again, looking for some explanation that would make this less devastating. But the documentation was comprehensive and clear. Hannah had been systematically lying to me for almost a year, conducting an affair while planning her exit from our marriage, all while attending weekly therapy sessions to help her manage the emotional stress of her deception. The evaluation included treatment recommendations and progress notes from multiple sessions. Dr. Foster had been trying to help Hannah make a decision, either commit to our marriage by ending the affair, or end our marriage honestly so she could pursue the relationship with James. But Hannah had been unwilling to choose, preferring to maintain both relationships while using therapy to manage her guilt. There were references to financial anxiety about leaving a stable marriage for an uncertain future with James, despite his wealth. Hannah had apparently discussed James's lifestyle extensively with Dr. Foster, his art collection, his galleries, his influence in the cultural community. But she was concerned about giving up the security of our dual-income household and shared mortgage for a relationship that might not lead to marriage. The most painful part was reading about how Hannah described our relationship to her therapist. According to the notes, she characterized me as emotionally supportive but professionally stagnant, and our marriage as comfortable but intellectually limiting. She apparently felt that my freelance design work was holding her back from the kind of sophisticated artistic circles she wanted to join. Patient reports spouse's creative work as small-scale and commercial rather than artistic, Dr. Foster had written. Expresses frustration with spouse's satisfaction with local client base rather than pursuing more ambitious professional opportunities. I had been proud of building a successful freelance practice that allowed me to work from home and be present for Lucas. But Hannah had been discussing my career choices with a therapist as evidence of my inadequacy as a partner. The evaluation also documented Hannah's concerns about Lucas. She worried about the impact of divorce on him, but she was also excited about the opportunities James could provide: private school tuition, art lessons with established teachers, exposure to serious cultural experiences that I couldn't afford to provide. Patient reports guilt over considering son's educational opportunities as factor in relationship decisions, but acknowledges paramour's financial resources could significantly enhance child's artistic development. So Hannah had been weighing whether James's money was worth abandoning our family. I sat in my studio for over an hour, reading through the psychological evaluation multiple times. The clinical language couldn't disguise the betrayal. Hannah had been living a double life, attending therapy to help her manage the emotional complexity of cheating on me while planning her future with another man. The most disturbing revelation was the timeline. According to Dr. Foster's notes, Hannah had initiated therapy not because she was guilty about the affair, but because she was having trouble managing the logistics of maintaining two relationships. She wasn't seeking help to save our marriage. She was seeking help to decide which relationship would be more advantageous for her future. When Hannah finally came home that night around 11:30, I was still in my studio, staring at the psychological evaluation. I heard her heels on the hardwood floor, then the sound of her purse being set on the kitchen counter. She climbed the stairs quietly, probably assuming Lucas and I were both asleep. I should have confronted her immediately. I should have walked upstairs and demanded an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe shock, maybe the need to fully understand what I was dealing with before I acted. Instead, I carefully copied the entire evaluation, making sure to preserve every page of Dr. Foster's assessment. Then, I sealed the original documents back in their envelope. Tomorrow, I would return them to the mail carrier, claiming they had been delivered to the wrong address. Hannah would never know I had seen them, but I would know everything. I stayed awake most of that night, lying next to my wife in the bed we had shared for 13 years, listening to her breathe and wondering how long she had been planning to leave. The psychological evaluation had documented months of therapy sessions focused on exit strategies and financial planning for lifestyle transitions. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. It was a calculated decision to audition a replacement for our marriage while maintaining the security of our relationship as her backup plan. The next morning, I went through our normal routine, making coffee, getting Lucas ready for school, discussing the day's schedule with Hannah. She kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, the same casual peck on the cheek she had given me thousands of times before. But now I knew it was performance, a habit maintained to preserve her secret. After dropping Lucas at school, I returned to my studio and began researching Dr. Patricia Foster's practice. Her website described her specialization in relationship therapy and life transition counseling. She offered services for individuals navigating major life changes, including divorce planning and conscious uncoupling, apparently the therapeutic term for leaving your spouse as thoughtfully as possible. I also started investigating James Sterling more thoroughly. His professional biography was impressive. Galleries in 3 cities, representation of over 50 contemporary artists, a personal collection featured in art magazines. His Instagram account showed a lifestyle of art fairs, gallery openings, and cultural events in cities across the West Coast. He was exactly the kind of sophisticated art world figure that Hannah had always admired. But I also found something interesting in the Seattle art community forums. James had a reputation for developing personal relationships with the curators and gallery directors he worked with. There were subtle references to his mentorship of young women in the arts, always described in professional terms but with implications that made me uncomfortable. One forum post from a Seattle gallery worker mentioned James's pattern of supporting emerging female curators through generous donations and professional opportunities. Another comment referred to his close working relationships with museum staff in multiple cities. It wasn't explicit, but the pattern was clear. James Sterling used his wealth and influence to develop intimate relationships with women who worked in cultural institutions. Hannah wasn't his first curator. Over the following days, I started paying closer attention to Hannah's schedule and behavior. The psychological evaluation had mentioned that she attended therapy sessions every Tuesday at 5 p.m., appointments she had been disguising as late meetings or museum events. Sure enough, every Tuesday evening, Hannah would announce that she needed to stay late at work for various professional obligations. I also noticed that her weekend art installations in Seattle coincided perfectly with James's gallery events. His website showed exhibition openings and artist receptions that aligned exactly with Hannah's trips. She had been attending these events as James's companion while telling me they were work-related travel. The most painful discovery was financial. I started reviewing our bank statements and credit card bills, looking for evidence of Hannah's double life. What I found was worse than I expected. For the past 6 months, our health insurance had been paying for Hannah's therapy sessions. The explanation of benefit statements showed weekly claims to Dr. Foster's practice, totaling over $3,200 in mental health services. Hannah had been using our family's insurance benefits to pay for therapy sessions focused on how to leave our family. She had also been spending money on clothes, dinners, and weekend trips that didn't align with her stated activities. There were charges at expensive restaurants in Seattle, purchases at high-end boutiques, and hotel expenses that couldn't be explained by museum business. Hannah had been financing her affair with James using our joint financial resources. But the most devastating discovery was a charge for a couple's retreat in the Columbia River Gorge. Hannah had told me she was attending a curator training conference that weekend, but the credit card statement showed payment to a resort that specialized in romantic getaways. She had been attending relationship counseling with James while lying to me about weekend work commitments. A week after discovering the psychological evaluation, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney named Michael Torres, who specializes in cases involving creative professionals. His office was in downtown Portland, within walking distance of the art museum where Hannah worked. Before meeting with him, I organized all my documentation, the psychological evaluation, financial records, timeline of Hannah's lies, and research about James Sterling's pattern of relationships with curators. Michael Torres turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had handled numerous divorces involving artists, musicians, and other creative professionals. He understood the unique financial challenges of our community: irregular income, shared professional networks, and the difficulty of valuing creative assets. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, he explained after reviewing my documentation. Infidelity doesn't affect property division, but this level of systematic deception and financial mismanagement could impact spousal support considerations. He was particularly interested in the psychological evaluation and insurance fraud angle. Using family insurance benefits to pay for therapy focused on leaving the marriage creates an interesting precedent. It demonstrates premeditation and financial deception that could influence the court's perspective on her credibility. Michael also pointed out that Hannah's professional relationship with James created potential ethical violations at the museum. Curators are expected to maintain arm's-length relationships with major donors. If she's been making exhibition decisions based on personal rather than professional considerations, it could affect her employment and professional reputation. We discussed custody arrangements for Lucas. Michael explained that Oregon courts prioritize the child's best interests, considering factors like stability, parental involvement, and the child's existing routine. Since I had been handling most of Lucas's daily care while Hannah focused on her career and affair, I was in a strong position for primary custody. Document everything, Michael advised. Your wife's systematic deception, the financial improprieties, the professional ethical violations, all of this builds a case for her lack of judgment and reliability. But most importantly, focus on what's best for your son. I left Michael's office with a clear strategy. Rather than immediately confronting Hannah, I would systematically document her behavior while building legal and financial protection for Lucas and myself. Hannah had spent months planning her exit from our marriage. Now it was my turn to plan strategically. The first step was securing my design business and client relationships. I started backing up all my work files, client contracts, and financial records. I also began reaching out to clients to strengthen professional relationships that might become crucial if Hannah's affair became public in Portland's small arts community. I was surprised by how supportive my clients were when I subtly explained that I might be facing personal challenges that could affect my work schedule. The owner of Cascade Hops, the brewery I had been designing for, offered to accelerate payment schedules and provide referrals to other businesses that might need design work. You've always been reliable and creative, he told me. If you're going through personal difficulties, we want to support you however we can. The Portland arts community is small enough that professional relationships often become personal friendships. I realized that my reputation for reliability and community involvement had built a network of people who would support me if Hannah's betrayal became public. I also started researching Hannah's relationship with James from a professional ethics perspective. The Portland Art Museum has strict policies about curator relationships with donors, particularly when it comes to exhibition decisions and acquisition recommendations. I found email correspondence between Hannah and museum board members that showed she had recommended accepting several of James's donations without following proper evaluation protocols. The timeline was damning. James's donations had accelerated dramatically after their affair began, and Hannah had fast-tracked their inclusion in museum exhibitions without the usual peer review process. She had been prioritizing her personal relationship over her professional responsibilities. But the most powerful evidence I discovered was Hannah's own documentation of her deception. Dr. Foster's evaluation had mentioned that Hannah kept detailed records of her therapy sessions and relationship planning. I found her journal hidden in our bedroom closet, underneath winter clothes she never wore. Reading Hannah's private thoughts about our marriage and her affair was devastating but crucial for understanding her mindset. She had been documenting her growing dissatisfaction with our life, her excitement about James's attention, and her calculations about the financial and social benefits of leaving me for him. Oliver is a good father and a kind man, she had written, but he's content with mediocrity. James challenges me to think bigger, to want more from life than just paying bills and attending local gallery openings. He makes me feel sophisticated in ways I never thought possible. Another entry was more cruel. I love Oliver, but I'm not sure I respect him anymore. His satisfaction with small-scale design work feels like giving up on artistic ambition. James says that in serious artistic circles, commercial design is considered selling out. I want to be part of something more important than brewery logos and coffee shop menus. The journal documented her awareness that the affair was hurting me and Lucas, but she justified it by describing James as offering opportunities for personal and professional growth that I couldn't provide. She wrote about expensive dinners, art exhibition openings, and conversations about cultural theory that made her feel intellectually stimulated in ways our marriage apparently didn't. James introduced me to artists and collectors I could never meet through Oliver's network, one entry explained. These people are creating culture, not just responding to it, When I'm with James, I feel like I'm part of something significant rather than just managing art that other people create. But the journal also revealed Hannah's anxiety about her choices. She worried about Lucas, about financial security, and about burning bridges in Portland's arts community. She had written extensively about her therapy sessions with Dr. Foster, documenting her struggle to choose between the security of our marriage and the excitement of James's lifestyle. Dr. Foster keeps pushing me to make a decision, Hannah had written. But why should I have to choose right now? Oliver provides stability and Lucas loves his father. James provides intellectual stimulation and professional opportunities. Can I have both until I figure out what I really want? The answer, apparently, was yes. As long as she could maintain the deception. 3 weeks after discovering the psychological evaluation, I decided to observe Hannah's behavior more directly. I hired a private investigator named Diana Weeks, who specialized in documenting extramarital affairs for divorce proceedings. Sarah was recommended by Michael Torres and had experience working with creative professionals who needed discretion. I don't need proof of the affair, I explained to Sarah. I already have that. But I need documentation of the systematic deception, the financial improprieties, and the professional ethics violations. Sarah's surveillance confirmed everything I suspected. Hannah was indeed attending therapy sessions every Tuesday, but she was also meeting James for dinner afterward at expensive restaurants that she had never mentioned to me. Her weekend trips to Seattle included overnight stays at James's penthouse apartment, shopping expeditions to galleries and boutiques, and attendance at cultural events as his companion. The surveillance photos were particularly damaging for Hannah's professional reputation. Sarah documented Hannah and James attending gallery openings together, visiting his private art collection, and behaving as a couple at events where she was supposed to be representing the Portland Art Museum professionally. She's not even trying to hide the relationship, Sarah observed. They're attending public events together in Seattle's art community. It's only a matter of time before someone from Portland sees them and word gets back to the museum. Sarah also discovered that James had been supporting Hannah financially in ways I hadn't realized. He had been paying for her expensive clothes, jewelry, and weekend expenses through cash payments and gifts that didn't appear on credit card statements. Hannah had been accepting financial support from a major museum donor while making professional decisions about his art donations. The private investigation lasted 2 weeks and provided comprehensive documentation of Hannah's affair, her financial deception, and her professional ethics violations. Combined with the psychological evaluation, financial records, and Hannah's own journal entries, I had assembled a complete picture of her betrayal. But I still hadn't decided how to use this information. The decision was made for me by an unexpected encounter at a gallery opening. I was attending the monthly First Thursday gallery walk in the Pearl District, something I had been doing for years as part of Portland's arts community. I wasn't looking for Hannah or James. I was genuinely there to support local artists and maintain my professional network. But as I was leaving a photography exhibition around 9 p.m., I saw them together outside a wine bar. Hannah was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something elegant and expensive that matched the sophisticated image she had been cultivating. James had his arm around her waist, and they were laughing about something as they walked toward his car. It was clear they were comfortable together, behaving like an established couple rather than professional colleagues. What struck me most was how happy Hannah looked. She was animated and relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. This wasn't a woman struggling with guilt about an affair. This was a woman enjoying her new relationship while maintaining her marriage as a convenient backup plan. I took photos with my phone, documenting their public behavior as evidence of the affair's serious nature. But watching them together also clarified something important. Hannah had already made her choice. She just hadn't been honest about it. That evening, I finalized my plans for confronting Hannah and protecting my interests in the inevitable divorce proceedings. I organized all my documentation, confirmed my strategy with Michael Torres, and prepared for the conversation that would end our marriage. But first, I decided to take one more step that would expose Hannah's betrayal to the community she had been trying to impress. Portland's arts community is remarkably interconnected. Gallery owners, museum staff, collectors, and artists all attend the same events, serve on the same boards, and compete for the same resources. Reputation and professional relationships are crucial for success, particularly for someone in Hannah's position. I began strategically sharing information about Hannah's affair and professional ethics violations with key figures in Portland's cultural community. I started with Dr. Margaret Williams, who serves on the Portland Art Museum's board of directors and had been a professional reference for my design work. I thought you should be aware of some concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving Hannah and a major donor, I told Dr. Williams during a coffee meeting. I provided her with documentation of the timeline, James's donations, Hannah's exhibition decisions, and evidence of their personal relationship. Dr. Williams was troubled by the information. Curators are expected to maintain professional boundaries with donors, she explained. If Hannah has been making acquisition and exhibition decisions based on personal relationships rather than artistic merit, it raises serious questions about her judgment and the museum's integrity. I also shared information with other gallery directors and cultural organizations where Hannah had been building her reputation. Portland's arts community values authenticity and ethical behavior. Systematic deception and professional conflicts of interest are serious violations of community standards. The response was swift and decisive. Within a week, word had spread throughout Portland's cultural circles about Hannah's affair and the professional ethics violations it entailed. Museum donors began asking questions about the acquisition process for James's donations. Gallery owners reconsidered Hannah's involvement in upcoming exhibitions. Cultural organizations started distancing themselves from her professional activities. But the most significant consequence came from an unexpected source: Seattle's art community. News of Hannah's affair with James Sterling traveled north through the network of galleries, museums, and collectors that connect the Pacific Northwest art scene. What Portland's cultural community discovered was that James had a pattern of developing intimate relationships with curators and gallery directors in multiple cities. A Seattle gallery owner named Patricia Reeves contacted me after learning about Hannah's situation. Patricia had worked with James 3 years earlier and experienced similar professional boundary violations. James Sterling uses his wealth and art collection to manipulate women in cultural positions, Patricia explained. He identifies curators and gallery directors who are ambitious but financially constrained, then offers them professional opportunities in exchange for personal access. It's predatory behavior disguised as arts patronage. Patricia introduced me to 2 other women who had similar experiences with James, a museum director in Vancouver and a gallery curator in San Francisco. All 3 had been approached by James with offers of donations, exhibitions, and professional advancement that gradually became personal relationships. When they tried to maintain professional boundaries, James withdrew his support and moved on to other targets. Hannah isn't his first curator, Patricia told me. She's just the most recent in a pattern of behavior that the West Coast arts community has been quietly dealing with for years. This information transformed my understanding of Hannah's affair. She hadn't been seduced by a sophisticated art collector who appreciated her intelligence and professional expertise. She had been targeted by a predator who specialized in exploiting women in cultural positions. I shared this information with Dr. Williams and other Portland Art Museum board members. The revelation that James Sterling had a documented pattern of inappropriate relationships with museum staff created a scandal that extended far beyond Hannah's personal choices. The museum board launched a formal investigation into all of James's donations, exhibition decisions involving his art, and Hannah's professional conduct during their relationship. The investigation revealed that several of James's pieces had been acquired and exhibited without proper evaluation, potentially diminishing the museum's collection quality and professional reputation. The board also discovered that James had been using his relationship with Hannah to gain inside information about other donors, acquisition strategies, and museum politics. He had been leveraging his intimate access to museum operations for competitive advantage in his gallery business. Within 2 weeks of the investigation's launch, the Portland Art Museum terminated Hannah's employment for professional misconduct and conflicts of interest. James Sterling was banned from making future donations, and his existing pieces were removed from exhibition pending a comprehensive review of their artistic merit. Hannah's career as a curator was effectively over. The personal confrontation I had been dreading never happened the way I expected. Instead of me presenting evidence and demanding explanations, Hannah came home one evening and found divorce papers waiting on our kitchen table. She stood in the doorway for several minutes, reading through the legal documentation that detailed her systematic deception, financial improprieties, and professional ethics violations. When she finally looked up, her face was pale but not surprised. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About 4 weeks, since I accidentally opened your psychological evaluation." Hannah sat down at our kitchen table, still holding the divorce papers. "I suppose there's no point in denying anything." "No, there isn't." We sat in silence for several minutes while Hannah absorbed the reality that her carefully managed double life had collapsed completely. She had lost her job, her professional reputation, her financial security, and her marriage within the span of 2 weeks. "What about Lucas?" she finally asked. "He'll live primarily with me, but you'll have regular visitation, unless you're planning to move to Seattle to be with James." Hannah's expression shifted at the mention of James's name. "James is no longer part of my life. Once the museum investigation started and word spread in the art community, he decided our relationship was too much of a liability for his business. So James Sterling had abandoned Hannah as soon as her affair became public and professionally inconvenient. The sophisticated art collector, who had promised her intellectual stimulation and cultural advancement, had disappeared the moment she needed support." "I'm sorry, Oliver," Hannah said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I never intended for things to go this far." "You attended therapy for 6 months to figure out how to leave our marriage while maintaining the affair. You spent thousands of dollars on clothes and weekend trips with another man. You used our family's insurance to pay for counseling about how to abandon our family. This wasn't an accident, it was a plan." Hannah couldn't deny the evidence, so she didn't try. Instead, she moved out that weekend, taking only her personal belongings and leaving Lucas and me to rebuild our lives in the house that had once been our family home. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward, given the extensive documentation I had assembled. Oregon's no-fault divorce laws meant that Hannah's infidelity didn't directly affect property division, but her financial deception and professional misconduct influenced the court's decisions about spousal support and custody arrangements. Michael Torres presented our case methodically, documenting Hannah's systematic deception, misuse of family financial resources, and prioritization of her affair over family responsibilities. The psychological evaluation provided particularly compelling evidence of Hannah's premeditated planning to leave the marriage while maintaining the relationship as backup security. Mrs. Bennett used family insurance benefits to pay for therapy sessions focused on exit planning from the marriage, Michael explained to the court. She maintained a secret financial relationship with a museum donor while making professional decisions that benefited his business interests. This demonstrates a pattern of deception and poor judgment that extends beyond the extramarital affair. The court awarded me primary custody of Lucas, with Hannah receiving standard visitation rights. The custody decision was based primarily on my greater involvement in Lucas's daily care and education, as well as the stability of my home-based business compared to Hannah's unemployment and damaged professional reputation. Property division followed Oregon's equitable distribution principles, but with considerations for Lucas's need for housing stability and my business use of our home. I retained ownership of our Craftsman house, while Hannah received the majority of our investment accounts and retirement savings. The settlement was roughly equal in financial terms, but I kept the family home that provides stability for Lucas and workspace for my design business. The most satisfying element of the legal proceedings was the court's treatment of Hannah's therapy expenses. While I couldn't recover the insurance payments that had already been made, the court considered her misuse of family mental health benefits as evidence of financial deception that influenced spousal support calculations. Hannah was ordered to pay a portion of Lucas's childcare and education expenses, but her unemployment and damaged professional reputation limited her ability to provide significant financial support. The court acknowledged that her loss of career earning potential was partly self-inflicted through professional misconduct. The legal resolution took 4 months, during which Hannah struggled to find new employment in the cultural sector. Word of her affair and ethics violations had spread throughout the Pacific Northwest arts community, making her unemployable in her chosen field. She eventually accepted a marketing position with a corporate firm outside the art world, earning significantly less than her former museum salary. Meanwhile, my design business experienced unexpected growth as Portland's arts community rallied around me. The way I had handled Hannah's betrayal, systematically, professionally, and without public drama, earned respect from clients and colleagues who had watched the situation unfold. Gallery owners, museum board members, and cultural organizations began recommending my design services to other arts-related businesses. My reputation for discretion and reliability, combined with sympathy for my personal situation, generated new client relationships that expanded my business beyond local breweries and coffee shops. The owner of Cascade Hops introduced me to other entrepreneurs who were launching creative businesses, a boutique hotel, an artisanal food company, and a sustainable fashion brand. These clients offered more sophisticated design challenges and higher-paying contracts than my previous small business work. 6 months after Hannah's affair became public, I was approached by the Portland Art Museum about designing their new identity and promotional materials. The museum board wanted to rebrand following the scandal involving Hannah and James Sterling, and they chose me partly because of my professional reputation and partly because of community sympathy for how I had been treated. "We need someone who understands both artistic integrity and professional reliability," Dr. Williams explained when she offered me the contract. "Your work has always demonstrated both qualities, and your handling of recent personal challenges shows the kind of character we want associated with the museum." The museum rebranding project was the most prestigious contract of my career, providing both financial success and professional validation. The board approved designs that emphasized the museum's commitment to artistic excellence and community engagement, values that had been compromised by Hannah's relationship with James Sterling. The project also introduced me to other cultural organizations throughout the Pacific Northwest who needed design services. Within a year of Hannah's affair, my freelance practice had evolved into Bennett Design Group, a small agency specializing in cultural and creative businesses. But the most important change in my life was Lucas's response to our new family situation. Initially, I worried about how the divorce would affect him. At 10 years old, he was old enough to understand that his parents' marriage had ended, but too young to comprehend the complex betrayal that had caused it. I tried to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the fact that both Hannah and I would continue to love and support him. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love," I told him. "Your mother and I aren't going to be married anymore, but we're both still going to be your parents." Lucas was sad about the divorce, but he adapted to our new routine remarkably well. Hannah's evening events and weekend travel had already reduced her presence in his daily life, so her absence wasn't as disruptive as it might have been for other children. What surprised me was how much Lucas enjoyed having more of my undivided attention. Without Hannah's professional obligations and evening social events, our weekends became focused on activities Lucas enjoyed: art classes, museum visits, and creative projects in my home studio. I like it when it's just us, Lucas told me one evening while we were working on a sculpture project together. Mom was always busy with work stuff. Lucas began spending time in my studio, watching me work on design projects and asking questions about the creative process. I started teaching him about typography, color theory, and visual composition, skills that complemented his natural artistic talents. His art teacher noticed the improvement in his work and suggested that he apply for advanced programs at the Pacific Northwest College of Arts Youth Academy. Lucas was accepted into their weekend program for gifted young artists, where he began learning techniques and working with materials that I couldn't provide at home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hannah had justified her affair partly by claiming that James could provide better artistic opportunities for Lucas than I could. But after her betrayal destroyed her career and reputation, it was my expanding design business and community connections that opened doors for our son's artistic education. 1 year after discovering Hannah's affair, I met Jessica Ward at a fundraising event for Lucas's art program. Jessica is an elementary school art teacher who volunteers with the Pacific Northwest College of Arts community outreach initiatives. She had heard about my story through Portland's Arts Community Network and was curious about meeting the graphic designer who had built a successful business while raising a talented young artist as a single father. "I've heard about your son's work," Jessica told me at the fundraising dinner. "His teachers say he has remarkable technical skills for his age, and more importantly, he has something meaningful to express through his art." Jessica and I started talking about art education, creative development in children, and the challenges of nurturing artistic talent while providing practical life skills. I was impressed by her dedication to making art accessible to students from all economic backgrounds, and she appreciated my commitment to building a design business that supported the local creative community. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally over several months of shared involvement in Lucas's art education and Portland's cultural events. Jessica understood the demands of creative work and single parenting, and she brought her own perspective as an educator who had dedicated her career to nurturing young artists. Lucas is lucky to have a father who takes his artistic development seriously while still prioritizing his emotional well-being, Jessica observed after spending time with us at a gallery opening. A lot of parents in the arts community push their children toward career success without building the foundation of personal confidence and creative authenticity. Jessica's presence in our lives provided balance that I hadn't realized we needed. She brought structure and educational expertise to Lucas's artistic development, while I provided the business knowledge and community connections that could help him understand how creative careers actually function. 2 years after Hannah's affair was discovered, Lucas was thriving in his art programs. My design business had grown into a regional agency, and Jessica and I were discussing marriage. Our blended family felt natural and supportive in ways that my marriage to Hannah never had, even before her betrayal. The contrast was striking. Hannah's affair had been justified by her desire for intellectual stimulation and professional advancement, but it had destroyed her career and left her isolated from the artistic community she had wanted to join. Meanwhile, the stable, supportive relationship she had abandoned had evolved into something more successful and fulfilling than anything she had achieved through her deception. Hannah's attempts to rebuild her professional reputation were largely unsuccessful. The marketing job she had accepted after being fired from the museum was unfulfilling and paid significantly less than her former curator salary. She tried to freelance as an arts consultant, but the scandal surrounding her affair and professional ethics violations made it difficult to find clients willing to trust her judgment. She maintained regular visitation with Lucas, but their relationship was strained by his awareness that her choices had destroyed our family. Lucas was polite and affectionate during their time together, but he clearly preferred the stability and creative opportunities available in my household. "Mom keeps asking me about art stuff, but she doesn't really understand what I'm working on," Lucas told me after one of his weekend visits with Hannah. "She knows the names of famous artists, but she doesn't get why I like the projects I'm doing." Hannah's attempts to connect with Lucas often felt forced, as if she was trying to demonstrate her continued relevance to his artistic development. But her damaged reputation and limited connections in the art world meant she couldn't provide the kind of opportunities and mentorship that he was receiving through my business network and Jessica's educational expertise. 3 years after the divorce, Hannah began dating a corporate executive who had no connection to the arts community. She seemed to be pursuing financial security rather than the intellectual stimulation that had motivated her affair with James Sterling. Her social media posts showed a conventional lifestyle focused on expensive restaurants and luxury travel, rather than the sophisticated cultural engagement she had claimed to value. The transformation was telling. Hannah's betrayal of our marriage had been justified by her desire for a more elevated, culturally sophisticated lifestyle. But the consequences of her deception had left her with fewer opportunities for artistic engagement than she had enjoyed as my wife and Lucas's mother. Meanwhile, James Sterling's reputation in the Pacific Northwest arts community never recovered from the scandal. Other curators and gallery directors came forward with similar stories of his predatory behavior, creating a pattern that made him unwelcome at most cultural events and institutions. His gallery business in Seattle struggled as artists and collectors became aware of his manipulative relationships with museum staff. Several artists withdrew their work from his representation, and collectors began questioning the authenticity and value of pieces they had purchased through his recommendations. James eventually sold his Seattle gallery and moved to Los Angeles, where his reputation was less well known. But the art world is surprisingly small and well-connected, and word of his unethical behavior continued to follow him. His influence and respect in the cultural community had been permanently damaged by his treatment of Hannah and other women in museum positions. 5 years after discovering Hannah's affair, I was invited to speak at the Pacific Northwest Design Conference about building creative businesses that support artistic communities. My presentation focused on the importance of authenticity, community engagement, and ethical business practices in the cultural sector. Success in creative fields isn't just about talent or financial achievement, I told the audience of designers, artists, and cultural entrepreneurs. It's about building relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. When we prioritize personal advancement over community support and ethical behavior, we damage the very networks that make creative careers possible. The presentation was well received, and several attendees mentioned that my story had influenced their own decisions about balancing personal ambition with professional integrity. My reputation as someone who had handled personal betrayal with grace and professionalism had become part of my professional brand. Bennett Design Group had grown to employ 6 designers and work with clients throughout the Pacific Northwest. We specialized in cultural organizations, creative businesses, and companies that wanted to support artistic communities. The agency's success was built on the same principles that had guided my response to Hannah's affair: thorough preparation, strategic thinking, and commitment to ethical behavior. Lucas, now 15, had been accepted into early admission programs at several prestigious art schools. His portfolio demonstrated technical skills and creative vision that impressed teachers and admissions counselors across the country. More importantly, he had developed the confidence and work ethic necessary for a successful creative career. "I want to study both fine art and design," Lucas told me while working on his college application portfolio. "I think understanding commercial design will make me a better artist, and understanding art will make me a better designer." His perspective reflected the integration of artistic and practical considerations that Jessica and I had tried to model in our household. Lucas understood that creative success requires both inspiration and strategic thinking, both artistic vision and professional reliability. Jessica and I had married the previous year in a small ceremony attended by our families and the Portland arts community that had supported us through the challenging transition from my divorce. Our wedding celebration was held at the Portland Art Museum, where my design work was prominently featured in their new branding and exhibitions. "This is what authentic partnership looks like," Dr. Williams said in her toast at our wedding reception. two people supporting each other's creative work while building something larger than themselves. Our marriage was based on shared values and mutual respect, rather than the emotional intensity and cultural aspiration that had characterized my relationship with Hannah. Jessica and I approached our partnership with the same strategic thinking and ethical commitment that had guided my response to discovering Hannah's affair. The final chapter of this story came 6 months ago, when Hannah reached out to me through a mutual acquaintance. She had heard about my agency's success and Lucas's acceptance into advanced art programs, and she wanted to congratulate me on building the kind of life she had claimed to want during her affair. "I made a terrible mistake," she admitted during our brief conversation. "I thought James could provide opportunities and experiences that you couldn't, but I was wrong about what actually matters for creative fulfillment and professional success." Hannah acknowledged that her pursuit of cultural sophistication and professional advancement had led her to abandon the stable, supportive relationships that provided the foundation for real creative achievement. Her affair had been motivated by a misunderstanding of what constitutes authentic artistic success. "You and Jessica have created the kind of life I thought I wanted," she continued. "Lucas is thriving artistically and personally. Your business is successful and respected, and you're both engaged with the arts community in meaningful ways. I destroyed all of that by chasing an illusion." I appreciated Hannah's acknowledgement of her mistakes, but her apology couldn't change the consequences of her choices. She had traded our family's stability and her professional reputation for a relationship that was always based on deception and ultimately had no substance beyond mutual exploitation. But her recognition of what she had lost also validated the choices I had made in responding to her betrayal. Rather than reacting emotionally or seeking revenge, I had focused on protecting Lucas's well-being and building the kind of creative, ethical business that could support our community. The medical records that had accidentally revealed Hannah's affair had provided me with information that allowed me to respond strategically rather than defensively. Her own documentation of the deception, combined with evidence of financial and professional misconduct, had enabled me to protect my interests while exposing behavior that damaged Portland's arts community. But more importantly, discovering the truth about Hannah's systematic betrayal had freed me to build relationships based on honesty and shared values. My marriage to Jessica, my partnership with Lucas in his artistic development, and my business relationships with clients and colleagues are all grounded in the kind of authenticity that Hannah had abandoned in pursuit of an image of sophistication. Today, as I write this story 5 years after that misdirected envelope changed everything, I can see how the medical records that accidentally revealed Hannah's systematic betrayal also revealed my opportunity to build a life based on principles I actually believe in. The confidential documents exposed devastating truth about systematic deception and planning to abandon our family, but they also revealed the path to authentic success that exceeded anything either of us had achieved through compromise and mutual accommodation of incompatible values. The painful truth those medical records contained was devastating to discover, but it ultimately became the foundation for the most fulfilling and productive period of my life. Hannah's systematic betrayal destroyed our marriage, but it also freed me to build something better, more honest, more creative, and more meaningful than anything we had shared. The misdirected envelope that was never meant for my eyes ultimately led to genuine happiness and authentic success, proving that sometimes the most devastating discoveries can become the foundation for building a better life. The Portland arts community that embraced me after Hannah's affair valued the same principles that guided my response to her betrayal: authenticity, reliability, and dedication to supporting others rather than exploiting them for personal gain. These values proved more powerful than wealth, social connections, or cultural sophistication for building lasting creative fulfillment and professional achievement. The life Jessica, Lucas, and I have created together is everything Hannah claimed to want, but was unwilling to achieve through honest work and authentic relationships. The medical records that revealed her systematic planning to abandon our family also revealed the foundation for genuine success based on integrity, community support, and commitment to values that create lasting creative achievement rather than superficial social advancement. This is the story of how misdirected mail revealed the truth about systematic betrayal and provided the foundation for building authentic success in Portland's creative community. The lesson from this experience is that responding to betrayal with strategic thinking and ethical behavior can lead to outcomes that exceed anything that seemed possible during the crisis. The medical records that accidentally revealed systematic deception also provided the information needed to build something better than what was destroyed. More honest, more creative, and more meaningful than anything we had shared during our marriage. The envelope that was never meant for my eyes contained information that changed everything, revealing both the devastation of systematic deception and the opportunity to build authentic success based on genuine community relationships and ethical behavior that created lasting creative achievement and personal fulfillment. In the end, those misdirected medical records didn't just expose Hannah's affair. They exposed the opportunity to live according to principles I actually believe in, to build relationships based on shared values rather than mutual convenience, and to achieve success through community support rather than individual exploitation. The painful truth they revealed became the foundation for the most authentic and productive period of my life, proving that sometimes the most devastating discoveries can become the beginning of something genuinely better.